Kornheiser.
This is the Tony Kornheiser Show on ESPN 9890.
Everybody knows this song, and everybody knows that it means we introduce the smartest man in Washington, Abbey Lowell, my friend Abbey Lowell, who's not in Washington today, who's got a case of his own. But we're not going to talk about that because it's his case. We're going to talk about Trayvon Martin and the arrest and the charge of second-degree murder. And, Abbey, let us start with this. What is he charged with, and is he being, in your opinion, overcharged? Because I believe the penalty is life imprisonment.
So, Tony, there are four kinds of murder charges. Murder 1, which everybody knows is sort of premeditated.
Yes.
Murder 2, which is an intentional killing. I'll come back to it because in this case, there's an additional requirement in Florida for a criminal act with a deprived criminal mind. It just means intentionality.
Right.
The third is manslaughter, which is the traditional you find, somebody in bed with your husband or wife and you take out a gun and shoot them in passion. And the fourth is negligence, like somebody's drunk at the wheel, although that could be more as well. So those are the four, and it has to do with the degree of intentionality. Second-degree murder, for which Zimmerman was charged, means it wasn't premeditated. And premeditated doesn't have to be 3 days in advance, but it still wasn't premeditated. That it was intentional, that it was done with some degree of criminality, meaning that there was no justifiable excuse. Manslaughter and negligence envisions that you can have some justifiable excuse that you went overboard with. Right. So is he overcharged? Probably not to begin with. I think what people have said is that the evidence supports the idea that this guy was unarmed, Trayvon Martin was unarmed, and maybe there should have been an ability to run away. He didn't, and a gun came out and was shot. So I don't think so. It's probably the right charge to begin with. It may not be the charge that sticks, however.
Let me get to a question, and all of my questions, when they're legal, may be completely stupid. But in this particular case, when you talk about intentionality and this charge, doesn't he have this standing law in Florida? Doesn't he have that as his defense? Are you then putting the law on trial as well as the person?
Okay, there are two defenses that get confused in this story. One is that Florida and a number of other states have this law that says you may stand your ground when you are in imminent fear of having some violence committed against you. And that should be distinguished from the traditional self-defense defense. So let me explain the difference. The stand your ground traditionally has only applied in one's own home. So in other words, if somebody is breaking in through your window, you do not have to wait until they get in, start robbing you, threaten you, take out your gun and shoot them. Unfortunately, or not, depending on people's point of view, if the person is sort of coming into your house and looks menacing, then you can use deadly force.
Okay.
That stands your ground. Florida and other states have extended that outside of your own home to any situation where you find yourself in a position feeling the same threat of violence. That means that you don't have to get to the point of self-defense. Self-defense means you've already engaged with the person who's beating on you or has his own gun or knife, and that's when you do it. So it's a matter of degree. Therefore, Zimmerman has a defense that is, if you will, earlier in the episode than self-defense. And it's not putting that defense on trial because that's not an all-encompassing defense. That defense doesn't mean if somebody looks at you the wrong way, you say, oh, my gosh, take out your gun and shoot them. You still need to show that you had a justifiable or reasonable fear such that you could stand your ground at this point. So it is similar but not identical to self-defense.
Okay. Do you think, as a trial lawyer, do you think he can get a fair trial in the state of Florida, given everything that's going on right now? Would you be comfortable defending him in the state of Florida?
Well, the short answer to that question is maybe not right in the neighborhood or in the vicinity in which he has been arrested.
Right.
But look, you have a lot of techniques that are used now in order to weed out people who come to a case with incredibly strong feelings, something that I'm doing here today.
Right.
And so you can have a written questionnaire. You have individual questions of potential jurors behind closed doors. You can really talk to people and figure out whether they harbor more than their, wow, it sounds bad to me, but I have an open mind and I'll hear the evidence. However, in cases like this, and it's happened all the time, you do move it. There are change of venues. And a change of venue, if the defense wants it, and I imagine the defense is likely going to want it, is going to move it to some place that isn't in that same sort of hotbed of emotion at the moment, and maybe in a place, by the way, in which the demographics are different. You don't have the right to, the prosecution, for example, doesn't have the right to say, well, in this jurisdiction, Judge, there are X number of whites and Y number of people of color, so I want to move this to a place with the same demographics. They can move it to a place that doesn't have the same demographics to get it away from the publicity and the strong emotions. So don't be surprised if you see what's called a motion for a change of venue.
I've got to tell you, Abby, with what has gone on so far and the length that this has carried on, I can't even imagine a place that wouldn't be charged when this trial comes up, because I think I think it becomes a movable group of people who put that pressure on all the time.
Yeah, well, the outside people who will come, and the Reverend Sharpmans and others may come, and they may, but you can, the hot emotion of the place in which the shooting occurred and where the satellite trucks exist every day, you'd be surprised, Tony, that if you go, 50 miles away to another jurisdiction, they've read the case, they've heard the case, but we live in a society in which every case that has some high profile is known way beyond the place where it's going to be tried. And once you get out of the cauldron of the raw emotion, you can move it to some place where you do have a chance of a fair and impartial juror. But a judge is going to have to do all the things that get you there. Written questionnaires, individual questioning of jurors in chambers, and things like that, so you can really weed out people as well as you can.
Do you think with a charge like this, second-degree murder with a high degree of intentionality and even some premeditation, obviously, do you think that that's the charge that if this goes to trial will be brought, or is this an encouragement for a defendant to plead out and take jail time rather than take a risk that he'd be convicted of that?
Always, if you are a prosecutor and you believe you have a case that needs to be tried and convicted, you'd be willing, if you were a good prosecutor, to take some plea that vindicates your law enforcement interest at some level.
Right.
And so whether or not his conviction is for second-degree murder or manslaughter, and it gets you the jail time or the vindication that you believe, a prosecutor would take it. Prosecutors charge cases higher sometimes to put pressure to make a deal. Whether there's a deal to be made here, those are so many ponderables now. Who knows? Because we just don't know the evidence. I mean, you're starting to get little bits of it, but you don't know enough. But here's what's likely to happen. I mean, the other thing is that cases are often brought with high charges because the prosecutors believe that at the end of the day, if there's a decent defense, a jury will compromise down a bit. So they may go with second-degree murder.
Okay.
There'll be a self-defense claim made, and the jury will come back with manslaughter. Those are considered lesser included offenses, and a jury has the right to find somebody guilty for the lesser included offense within a higher charge.
Let me get to a couple of questions that the average person on the street, I think, would have. One is, George Zimmerman until yesterday was a free man with no restrictions, not on bail, not arrested, not anything. A, why didn't he leave the country? And B, why did his original lawyers dump him? And how did he end up with the guy he's got now?
Okay, well, the first question is, he's professed his innocence. He's got family and friends here. This is his community. He's going to use the Florida statute. He's going to stand his ground and make a defense.
Okay.
I don't know anything that indicated that, his first response is, I'm going to get out of the United States and stay out. It's not easy to be a fugitive, and certainly not to be a fugitive when MSNBC, CNN, Fox, and every other place has your picture on every single hour.
Right.
So he's going to have a bond hearing. Everybody gets arrested when they are charged with a crime, and fairly soon you get a hearing to determine whether you should be released. And there are only two criteria. It's not punishment. It's not a sentence. You are let out. The government has to prove that either you're a risk to the community if you're out, or you're a risk of flight. Well, he's not a risk of flight, as you've just indicated.
He didn't do
As to his being a risk to the community, you can sort of condition that so that he doesn't go out after dark. He's confined to his house. He gets an ankle bracelet, whatever. The point is there will be a bond hearing, and if the judge follows the law, he should be released on some sort of conditions of release.
Okay.
And as to the lawyers,
yeah,
I don't know. That's very strange to all the lawyers out there. The lawyers, don't noisily withdraw and say, my client's done something wrong, so we're leaving. I don't know what to make of that. It's just not what lawyers are supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they got enough time on the Today Show to help their practice, and they said, well, we haven't heard from him in a while. We hadn't heard, you hadn't even met with the guy. Now he's got another guy, Mark O'Mara, not the golfer, some other guy named Mark O'Mara, and he's being thrown this case, probably the most notorious case in years. And how did he get involved?
I don't know how he got involved. I don't know who made the connection. But look, there's a lot of people in the country that are supporting Zimmerman now. There's websites. There's people probably contributing to a legal defense fund. People are making a cause out of this. Somebody made the match, and I think that's all you'll know for the moment.
How would you defend him if it came to you? I mean, it does seem to me. I don't know if there are any eyewitnesses. I don't think there are any eyewitnesses. It seems some person's word against another person's word, and even with all the clamor for, jail time and conviction in the actual court process, I don't think that's going to be all that easy. Is this a case that a defense attorney would want?
Well, it's a defensible case if you believe what you've heard about what Zimmerman is saying. I mean, it's a defensible case. What we don't know is, after he was told not to follow, did he follow, or did he go, and then did Mr. Martin follow him? Yeah. And why was there an engagement, and why did Martin run away? I mean, he's a football player. He could have outpaced Zimmerman in about 10 seconds. And how did the gun come out? And is there this stand your ground? So there are defenses to a case, whether it's a winnable case. It depends on what we find out about the facts, but it's clearly defensible.
Okay, well.